Hey everybody. It's been a while since I did a video, so I decided to make a video. What I wanted to talk about today was how do we learn in tennis? How do we teach students, and how do they learn? What I found is that there are two common ways that people learn anything, including tennis. One is repetition, the other is understanding. Repetition is pretty basic. Most people understand what that means. It just means going through a number of repetitions to try to habituate yourself into doing something a certain way. So it's just constant repetition over and over and over and over again. Example is doing a forehand drill over and over and over again to try to teach yourself how to hit deeper cross court, maybe. The other way is understanding. Understanding means that you have a reason why we're doing something, or you understand the concept behind something, and that adds to your understanding and adds to your knowledge base, and so you can be a smarter player that way. So, one thing is to hit cross court deep with a forehand constantly over and over and over again, and another thing is to understand how and why we hit cross court deep on the forehand side. An example of that would be to understand, well, if I wanted to go deeper, I might have to hit it higher. You either have to hit it higher and slower over the net, or you have to hit it harder and lower over the net. The alternative would be to hit it hard and high over the net, but that's going to cause the ball to go out. And if you hit slow and low over the net, chances are it's probably not going to go over. So understanding how you hit deep is different from just doing it over and over and over again, trying to hit deep. That sort of learning, that sort of teaching is going to get people where they need to get to, just much slower. Understanding, when someone understands a concept, they'll get to the destination, to their goal, a lot faster. And that's why it's important to know when to use different learning methods, different teaching methods, and when something else might be more appropriate. So when do we use repetition or understanding as opposed to the other? Most of the time you're going to do a lot of repetition with younger clients, younger students. Someone that is between 3 and 5 years old is probably not going to understand why topspin brings the ball down faster, or why slice will keep the ball in the air longer. They're just not going to understand it. They don't have the capacity to understand that. That's actually probably not completely accurate. There's probably going to be a few people that you might work with that will. But for the most part, the younger the client, the more you're going to have to use repetition. Someone that's a little bit older, say, closer to 10 years old, teenagers, adults, taking the time out of your lesson to teach them the understanding, the concepts, the reasoning behind things that we do will pay dividends. They'll learn faster. They'll be able to make better decisions on court. So they're going to, someone that's younger, I'll teach them to hit straight when they're approaching the net. When they're hitting an approach shot, you should consider to hit the ball straight. Whether it's in the middle or down the line, doesn't matter. Someone that is a little bit older, I'll explain to them, I'll take time out to explain to them, well, we're hitting straight to try to minimize the angles at which we're going to be attacked. You don't want to create an angle that you can't cover. You want to take time away from your opponent, because a straight line is the shortest distance between 2 points, and so we're putting our opponent in even more trouble. We're putting them under more pressure. Stuff like that will help an older student, an older client, understand the concept and be able to implement it faster and better. But that's kind of a little bit more difficult with a younger client. So that's times when we might use one as opposed to the other. Honestly, the best thing, I feel, to move people, to move the needle, I use that phrase, to move the needle, meaning from the point where you get the client to getting them to where they want to be, how fast can you move the needle of improvement? You know, is it going to take 10 lessons to get them to hit a good serve, or will it take 3 lessons? How fast can you move that needle? And you can move the needle of improvement very quickly by using both teaching techniques. So you want to do a lot of repetition, but you also want to make sure that your client understands why you're doing the things that you're doing, why you're asking them to do something a certain way. That also goes back to building trust with your client. If you're asking your client to do something and it's not completely intuitive, and admittingly a lot of tennis is not completely intuitive. It's one of the few sports where you're not going to the ball. You need to create space between you and the ball. That alone is a huge hurdle for most people. But when you explain to someone the concepts and the reasoning behind asking them to do something, what you're basically doing is building trust with your client, because now they know that you're not talking out of your butt, that you know what you're talking about, and you're asking them to do something a certain way because you consider it to be better than another way. In this way, you're also putting trust into them. You know, when you put trust into a person, they return that and they trust you. So it's not so much that you're talking down to them or that you're making demands. They feel like a partner in the learning. So you're teaching them what you have learned yourself. And that's pretty important as well. When someone trusts you, when a client trusts you, they're much more receptive to anything you ask them to do, and that goes a long way. Because if you're giving someone instruction and they're going to be resistant to that instruction, you're not going to be able to move the needle of improvement very much or very quickly. Yeah. So, couple of other things about understanding. When you're teaching someone to play tennis, or teaching them any facet of tennis, of the game, it's impossible to teach someone completely through just rigorous repetition. And I say that because if you teach someone to hit a forehand or a backhand or a serve, whatever the case might be, they're never going to hit the same forehand twice. They're never going to hit the same backhand twice. They'll never hit the same volley. So it's impossible to teach someone how to do something and prepare them to play tennis in a competitive arena. You know, every forehand you hit is in a different location on the court. The way it's coming in is different. The way it comes off your racket is different. The spin, the speed, the direction, the depth, your positioning, your body positioning. There's so many variables that every forehand is unique. And so there's no way to teach someone how to hit a forehand because every forehand is different. What you can do is explain to them why we hit the forehand a certain way, the mechanics of it. And so that builds a smarter player. They're able to make decisions on their own on the court. One of the best compliments that you can get as a tennis instructor is for someone else to tell you that your client, that your student, is a smart player. To say that they're a good player is a very nice compliment to receive, but not as good as being told that someone that you've worked with is a smart player. That means they can problem solve on court. That they're not only good, but they've gone beyond just being good. So that's a really admirable thing. You want to build smart players. And this is going back to another concept that I'll probably make another video about, that a good instructor, in my opinion, a good instructor is someone that makes themselves progressively less needed. If you can instill in your students and your clients a love for the game, then outside of their lessons, they're going to go out and do work. They're going to watch videos. They're going to read articles. They themselves are going to be watching a lot of tennis on television, not just through a spectator's eyes, which is important, but also through a critical eye. They're going to be looking at why certain things work and why certain things don't work, and that's going to pay dividends for them in their game. if you want to improve in tennis, it's not just about what you do in the lesson, but what you do outside of the lesson that's sometimes a lot more important. Because for a lesson, you might have a half hour, maybe an hour, sometimes even an hour and a half. But most of the time, not more than that. So someone that's playing between half an hour and an hour and a half a week, they're not going to see a great deal of improvement because they need time, not just on the court outside the lesson, but also off the court outside the lesson to put in work. The more hours you put in, the better you're going to get. So you need a place to practice what you do in your lessons. You need to play matches with friends and go out and hit a few balls. You also need to watch tennis. All that stuff adds up and makes people a better player. So part of your job as an instructor is to instill a passion for the game that's going to translate beyond just the lesson atmosphere. Also, when you're making someone more passionate about tennis and you're making them into a smarter player, they're not bogged down by the rhetoric of other things that they hear. You know, they're going to be a little bit more critical, and they're going to ask for reasons to build their understanding. Someone tells them, oh, this racket is the best. All right, well, why? Why is this string the best? Why do you say that semi-Western forehand is more important to having your toolbox than an Eastern forehand? When someone's mind is a bit more critical, then they're going to see improvements a lot faster as well. So, understanding in tennis, pretty important. Repetition, also important, but when you can combine both repetition with understanding, you're going to see results really fast. So it's important not to ignore understanding in tennis. Make sure that your client, if they can, understands the concepts and the reasoning behind the things that you're doing in the lesson. Not only does it make them a smarter player and a better player, but it instills a trust factor that you otherwise wouldn't get because you're taking them as your confidant. You're not talking down to them, you're making them a partner in the learning experience. And so they'll be more receptive to you later on with whatever you ask them to do. And of course that's going to move the needle very quickly. So don't ignore understanding, make sure that you implement that into your teaching. And I think that's everything I want to cover for today. Alright, thanks very much for watching and keep it tight.